Welcome to the pharmaphorum podcast. This is web editor Nicole Raleigh, and today I have with me Alfred Olivares, Global Managing Partner, Healthcare and Medtech at HTEC. Welcome, Alfred, or if I may, Al.
You definitely may call me Al. Excited to be in the podcast and looking forward to talking a little bit about the industry.
So today we'll be discussing how technology and AI can help healthcare systems tackle the affordability challenge while ensuring patients still benefit from cutting-edge treatments. No doubt listeners are aware that Novartis warned that NHS patients risk missing out on breakthrough medicines because of rising costs. So it raises the question, how can innovation reach patients in a financially sustainable way? But before we dive into all that, Al, perhaps you could introduce yourself to listeners a little bit more first, describing perhaps the journey that led you to do what you do today at HTEC and the passions along that way.
Sure. I usually define my passion as I do what I do because of the industry being focused in healthcare, but also because it relates to history with healthcare challenges and issues coming from South America to the United States. So, my last 20 plus years have been focused within the healthcare space, healthcare life sciences space, starting from industry, moving into consulting and working firms like Deloitte, IBM, Cognizant, really helping clients in the pharma, medtech, life sciences space and healthcare space around different things like strategy, driving operational excellence, and building transformation with the patient at the end of the result. One of the things that currently excite me about the role that I'm in today is that I transitioned from just doing the traditional back office capabilities and advising and strategy advising to really looking at how you look at real world engineering solutions, right, that we deliver at HTEC and how they can impact and drive the healthcare and medtech businesses with a focus on patient care and really driving to we make things more accessible and more affordable. My direct passions, obviously, I talked a little bit about my family. It is around connecting, the personal side of my life and history to how you can use technology to help drive more quote unquote human empathy in technology. And I put those quotes on because we're still talking about technology, and empathy is something that is a human trait, not a technical trait. But to help use those capabilities to help design solutions and offerings for clients that really accelerate innovation. With HTEC and the role that I've been playing, we're really an AI first digital firm. And what I mean by that is it's all about practical AI. We really drive around how do we use AI and around R&D acceleration, right? How do you look at it from a human in the typical people say human in the loop. Recently, I was working with one of my leaders, Nemanja, who's our COE person, and he used the term AI in the loop. And I think I prefer using that now more than saying human in the loop, because I think human in the loop prescribes that AI is extremely advanced and we're just there. I think it's more AI in the loop is where it should be, is because it's assisting us humans to be more efficient and to be able to find solutions that make it more practical for our patients.
Absolutely. So one could say AI in the human loop. So if we
Yes.
focus on this, having the patient in mind, in view at the end of the result, as you stated, I was wondering if we could address the central explorative question that we're going to be addressing today in this conversation. How can innovation reach patients in a financially sustainable way? Al, I believe you think that the affordability debate requires a third lever, as it were, digital transformation that makes care delivery smarter, faster, but also more sustainable. So what does that look like? I know that was a lot of questions there. Perhaps break it down for listeners.
Let's break it down, right? At the end of the day, it's an affordability debate, right? It's about how can you get drugs and offerings and, even devices to be more affordable for patients to be able to use and part of their treatments. At the end of the day, it's around that digital efficiency, like you said, the third lever, right? So historically, our industries have always been focused on price and access, right? But what's really missing is that process efficiency. And I think that's where AI can impact. It can help support process efficiency. If you look at how digital transformation is being leveraged in different industries and what they're trying to use it for and how is it applicable to this industry. It's really about how do we optimize the discovery of drugs using AI? How do you leverage it in clinical trials using things like in silico and, digital twins in a patient perspective, and how you can use AI to impact more efficient supply chains. Looking at those three areas, that's where it could actually drive efficiencies that will be cost effective to the organizations to be able to lower prices. It was interesting that when I was doing my MBA, we had a discussion around the responsibility of pharma companies to provide medicines at a low cost. And you take the stance, you have to take the two stances. Is it a moral obligation? Is it a business obligation? And it's both. The availability of AI now, I think it makes larger organizations now to be able to drive to that ability to make things more affordable using technology that 20 years ago, when I was much younger, we could have those capabilities. An example would be, how do you use AI-based target identification of patients, right? So one of the challenges I think your constituents have heard this before, is real world evidence and trials are very demographically focused and specific demographics. And it's hard to attain various demographics of people that are, maybe their diet isn't as good because they don't have the financial compensation to eat well, or their health is not good because they're involved in regions of the world that have, environmental issues. I think with the facilitation of AI to be able to use AI to be able to develop digital patients, digital twins, use that data to start looking at discovery and accelerate the discovery component are exciting, right? Exciting. At the end of the day, the FDA, I believe this past year, approved the first set of to be able to use data, right, digital data, to start the journey around drug discovery. I think if you link it to on the regulatory side, using AI is probably one of the quickest areas that people should look to adopt, because you can now accelerate the compliance side by being able to use AI to leverage things like creating 70 or 80% of a report, and then having the regulatory compliance team finalize that last mile and keep that, if being able to process things faster, which makes it more efficient. And then if you think about linking it to payers and the different government entities out there, I think there's opportunity to help accelerate approvals, validate findings, look at being able to resolve issues quicker so that companies and organizations can address risks to patients a lot faster, reducing overall impact to risk at the patient level and legal aspect of it, right? I think affordability really it isn't about lowering prices, right? Redesigning, how do we deliver innovation, leveraging technology with the human in the loop, with AI in the loop for humans.
Absolutely. So we're going to reiterate that phrase, as it were, today: AI in the human loop. So thank you, Al, for sort of covering how digital tools can reduce time and cost in R&D and help pharma bring products to market more efficiently, but also for looking at how data-driven platforms can support pharma in negotiating outcomes-based agreements with payers. I was just wondering on that latter point, though, if you wanted to now sort of, you mentioned the FDA previously. I wondered if you wanted to go into the UK context here and sort of comment upon how AI in that respect with the NHS can help with outcomes-based agreements.
I think, from a UK perspective, there's regulatory bodies in the US and in Europe. There is a common goal, right? The common goal is to ensure patient efficacy and that the treatments and drugs are all going to deliver good patient outcomes. From a European or UK perspective, I think the challenges that are being presented today are more around the different regulatory acts that are happening around AI, right? There is definitely a difference in point of view of how you can use AI tools in different parts of the world, UK being one of them. So I think the reality of it is how do you reevaluate the use of AI in a different context of what is data privacy and what does it really mean? And can the rules be changed to help facilitate the use of AI more effectively?
Absolutely. So, as with AI implementation within companies, we're always going to have the AI advocates, those who really are ushering in this fully digitalized era. And then we are going to have the AI wary. But I was just wondering, Al, about the role here of partnership. So, how can pharma partner perhaps with tech and healthcare providers to shift from treatment to prevention, protect budgets for high cost therapies, and fully bring in this AI as facilitator in this?
Sure. I mean, if we look at from a treatment to prevention perspective, right, is essentially the question is how do you leverage the ecosystem? If I were to kind of summarize, I think as we look at healthcare across the world, different regions have cost structures that support certain access of healthcare differently, but they're still and they're all on the rise, right? They're becoming unsustainable in some of the more global markets like the UK, US, Europe. So we've got to really look at it. Are they being proactive or is it being more reactive? And I would say they remain to be more reactive. I think the way to look at how to look at partner systems and how to pharmas partner with payers or how does pharma partner with providers is really looking at how do you change and develop new growth levers for all organizations, right? So how do they get involved a lot earlier rather than later? If you look at how pharma is evolving, they should look at medtech organizations who have been developing devices and software solutions for years, as now we think about pharma developing treatments that are not just drug related, but there's ancillary apps that support the use of drugs. And that's something that's very different that we haven't seen, in my youth, right? A pharma manufacturer, what did they produce? They produced a drug. And that drug was supposedly what would provide the treatment. You're seeing med device companies producing devices, but they have apps to track the data that's being used. You have the first approved depression treatment app that is being used in the United States to treat depression. The next part of this is now where does that app come into play with some of the depressive drugs that are out there that support people's needs from a mental health perspective. So I think the reality of it is pharma companies, organizations in life sciences, and we're going to come, pharma to life sciences, need to really involve community of practices that go across their specific business, but also with their ecosystem partners within life sciences, their competitors. In consulting, I always use the word co-opetition. Co-opetition is the ability to cooperate, but yet compete, right? But cooperate in the sense of for the client. Obviously, you compete in the services area. So now I lose that and say, from a farmer's perspective, where and how do you co-operate with each of the drug manufacturers out there? The pandemic showed how Pfizer and Moderna can co-operate, right? They helped develop the vaccine for COVID. So I think the pharma industry needs to start looking at how do we do that? How do we really enable solutions with data-driven platforms that have data that can be used without concern of total privacy? Because in order for you to find the right drugs that treat people's diseases, and you really need to have certain demographic data components that sometimes are isolated and not shared, right? They're anonymized. I think at the end of the day, you really want to see how do you use your clinical trial data along with your competitors' clinical trial data to really come up with what is the right treatment offering for patients. So it would require a very dynamic utopian kind of thinking, right? Everybody's looking for the best of the end of solution and manage it and balance it with a business mindset. At the end of the day, look at outcome-based agreements, right? Work with the payers to really understand how things are going to be reimbursed. Why would they be reimbursed? So it's not just about the pharma institutions working in isolation. It's about the ecosystem working together. And then how does the provider ensure that the data that they're collecting is value added to a payer as well as a manufacturer? HTEC talks about the offerings that we bring to the table. And it's a lot more than just building platforms. It's really understanding what is the future and how do you help the patient with innovative ways of creating value to our customers. At the end of the day, the accessibility of drugs and treatments for the future shouldn't be just about price, right? It's really about proving that the data that you collect and the leverageability of AI is actually providing patient benefit.
Thank you for that, Al. A lot to digest there for listeners. So let me attempt to summarize before I pose a final question to you today. So we're on the precipice of possibilities. We've got this era ushering in of drug plus software. We've got this amazing word of co-opetition. Love it. Thank you for that, Al. And we are in a state of partnering, of leveraging the ecosystem, AI and the human loop moment. So if we take that word you posited a moment ago of utopia, and we always, of course, have to be careful of utopia's opposite, but if we take the utopian view, consider everything today, consider a potential future where it's implemented well and safely and compliantly. What could the future of healthcare look like in, say, the next 5 or even 10 years?
If we were to take the, AI and the human loop concept, which I'm not going to take credit for, it's Dr. Nemanja Kovic from HTEC who kind of said that. I would say that really the future is going to blend the use of data, devices, and human insight, leveraging AI with a continuous review of what the output is having. So it's almost like at the end of the day, you're consistently taking this information and you're going to learn from it and you're going to use the data to help patients get the treatments that they're going to need. I think there's a convergence of you're going to see because pharma is now going down the not the device, but the software side of the house, right? And you see medtech going down the leverageability and how do you use pharma-based solutions within their medtech devices. You're going to see a hybrid of different offerings, a combinations of therapies with monitoring and measuring tangible outcomes that you can then go back and look at those outcomes to reevaluate what's the next component that's going to help patients live better, feel more like they're getting healthier, things like that. I think we're going to see much more looking at technology from a regulatory perspective as we evolve with AI, right? Because AI is here. AI is not going anywhere. It's learning, it's being taught. People are starting to see how the value of AI demographically, different age groups will embrace AI much more quicker than someone who's not been in the environment. But I think at the end of the day, you'll see frameworks that regulatory bodies are going to drive that may actually open over time rather than be restrictive as companies work together to drive more co-opetition. And at the end of the day, I think because the big difference now compared to when I was growing up is the vast level of knowledge that's attainable today is really empowering patients to take health into their own control. You can't say there's not enough data out there that you can't do your own research and you can't see how you as a patient want to be involved in your treatments. You're going to see more of a home diagnostic, at the end of the day, driving costs out of the system. What can be done at a clinic? What can be done in a hospital system? And then what can be done in a home? And with AI, I think that's going to enable that even more because you'll have things like we call them chatbots, but eventually we'll call them companions, right? We'll have the ability to using your cell phone to be able to have certain home healthcare capability. It's really important to think about that. In 5 to 10 years, we as a society will have the ability to be a lot healthier and using technology to partner with it. I always joke around Star Trek. One of my favorite shows growing up, ahead of its time. And if you look at the healthcare and the technology that's being used in there, it is medicine through a doctor, right? Assisted through technology, but still focused on the patient and the patient has its own thoughts on their health. So it'll be interesting if the Star Trek thing comes through in the next 5 to 10 years, but I'd like to believe that we're kind of almost there.
I think that analogy will resonate well with a large proportion of our listeners today. Thank you, Al. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure as well for me.
And that concludes another episode of the pharmaphorum podcast. You can find more information about this episode, including a download link and information about previous installments at pharmaphorum.com/podcasts. The pharmaphorum podcast is also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, Pocket Casts, Podbean, and pretty much wherever else you download your other podcasts from. Just search for pharmaphorum and follow and hit subscribe. Of course, don't forget to visit our website itself, where you can sign up for daily and weekly news and analysis bulletins. And do follow us on Blue Sky and LinkedIn at pharmaphorum. That's all for now. Thank you for listening.